Hi everyone, my name is Jessica Taylor-Bearman. I am the author of my YA memoirs, A Girl Behind Dark Glasses and A Girl in One Room. And they follow my journey of being severely chronically unwell with a disease called myalgic encephalomyelitis. Bit of a handful there, so a mouthful there. Yeah, it just follows the journey of someone of a teenager, because I was only 15 when I got ill, and it's going from being a completely healthy teenager to actually spending the next 4 years of my life constantly in hospital.
Yeah, it's something, my main question, and that's coming from like someone with chronic illnesses, is how did you find it hard to communicate and explore it through writing? Because as someone that's chronically ill myself, I can find it really hard to communicate and talk about my health problems and things. So did you find it kind of like a weightlifting experience, or was it really difficult to kind of go back to those times? Because when I was younger and going through all those things, they're times that I find really difficult to kind of look back on.
Yeah, so I feel that for my books, writing was actually my therapy to kind of come to terms with everything that had happened in my life. I think also, as in A Girl Behind Dark Glasses, I'm actually, for 18 months of the time, I'm mute. So I can't communicate, I can't do anything. And I found that challenging because I could never stick up for myself. I could never tell the doctors what I was feeling. And things happened around me, but they never asked me, if that made sense. You know, they never saw me as the person. And that's really why my books are called A Girl Behind Dark Glasses, A Girl in One Room, because it's really a sense of identity. And I think the fact was that I grew up ill, if that makes sense. So I grew up in that environment, but so much happened in that time that I think I started writing my book at that time when I couldn't speak, and it helped me to deal with it. And I think I have said this before, that in my particular Girl Behind Dark Glasses, I was so unwell when I was writing it that actually every word counted. Every word had a reason, it was there. So in a sense, I didn't really edit it a lot, that particular book, because I didn't have the energy to do it. I wasn't really well enough to do it. And I'd been writing it in my head for a long time. But when it came to actually doing the edit, when it was being published, that was challenging, because then you're reliving a life. Because I never read back what I wrote until I had to edit it for it to be published, and that was a challenge, to sort of relive that. And I think also there's sort of a medical post-traumatic stress that comes with sort of what you deal with, and so I basically relived everything like a second time, and sometimes even a third time. So yeah.
I don't know if it's something I'd have had the strength to do. I don't think, I'm not very good at looking back. I'm quite lucky in an aspect that nowadays it is a lot more manageable for me.
Yeah.
And I do
Yeah.
get to kind of do work activities and things. So I think
Yeah.
for me, looking back to a point where it was so dark for me, I struggle
Yeah.
looking back, never mind
Yeah,
kind of
I
like
think
writing
for
it
me
down.
it's about making peace with it and
Yeah,
coming to a point where that I can see as a past, and I can see that as the end. There was an end to that time. And for me, I had to be able to move on. But so much happened in that time. And I think really there was a sense of justice as well within my books. It was really about the fact that so much happened and no one knew any of it. And I was so I didn't know, I didn't have social media, I didn't have anything, any form of contact with people my own age. So my friends, they all moved on, they went to university and they did school, they lived, you know, and they couldn't understand why. One of the things was I used to be known as Jess at school all the time, and obviously whilst in hospital I changed and I was only known as Jessica. No one understood why. They found it really hard because I had always hated being called Jessica and that type of thing, which ironically now I actually genuinely don't like Jess. So I actually genuinely prefer Jessica. But there were a lot of changes and no one actually really knew. And I wanted to fill in those pages fill in the blanks, but without having to constantly go over the story.
Yeah.
So it's like I could almost say, just read that. That's what happened,
It's
you know?
horrible.
And I didn't have any visitors for a lot of the time as well. So I just didn't see anyone. And again, it's so much to try and tell your friends, you know? And in a way, there's only so many times you want to say it. And then you want to be like, okay, that's not me now. I've moved on from then. So for me, it was quite important to be able to sort of just draw a line. And I think the thing is, chronic illness, as I'm sure you'll agree, there's always a thing about identity, and it becomes a part of your life. Are you the illness, or are you the person? How does it fit in? And that's really what I wanted to explore, is how I felt at those different times. But the weird thing is, it's only looking back now that I can see how I felt at that time.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No.
I don't think, because I think at the time it was survival. I just dealt with what I had to get through each day. But actually coming to the emotional understanding of what happened, and that it's okay not to be okay, but it's okay to actually feel like that's a different time. It was all really a growing up experience. So basically I grew up in writing. But I would say I'm not fully grown up now, so it's all good.
Neither am I. I think and I think actually the non-grown up element of me comes a little bit from growing up with health problems. I think
Definitely,
that has a lot
absolutely,
to do with how I deal with it.
Yeah, because we never, like, you don't get a chance to grow up in the normal way, and so it does affect how you are and you know, and that's the bit in my books that I really wanted to explore, was that sense of how do I feel. Because, you know, at my 17th birthday I had like a SpongeBob birthday cake, do you know what I mean? And then people had completely different ways of life, because I never really went past 15, and that's quite a hard thing for other people to try and understand. But if you got ill at that time, I think for a long time I was just 15. I never changed for that time, because the rest of the world moved on, but my life didn't, you know. So that's really what my books are sort of about, is that sort of coming to terms with things. And also I think so much happened in that time that it needed to be told. I was like, this shouldn't be like this, you know. And I've always been a sense of someone who likes justice, who likes to see, well, why is it like that, you know? But no one was doing that. And the amount of times I was just told it was all in my head and stuff like that, and I thought, actually, I want you to know how it felt.
It's
so that's where
growing pains. You're just a teenager and teenagers get tired. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And I think there is just a misunderstanding, isn't it? And especially when they're sort of invisible illnesses, people don't see beyond what they can see, you know. They don't look, you know. And I think that's a big part of it as well, that you almost I wanted to give an image of what it was like, because you can describe it, but people can't see, because it's easy to turn off from that. It's easy to just see someone in a hospital bed, and if they can't talk, you just carry on, you know. but it's not easy to think of it from the other person's point of view and how they feel about that. Yeah, so that was something again that I really wanted to explore within my books.
Yeah. With your books, they're written in a kind of relaxed, almost like talkative style. Was that always how you kind of envisioned them being written? I found it really kind of amazing because it was like you were having a conversation, and it was that more kind of like laid back chat between friends kind of style, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. And yes, it was, I think it was a decision I made very early on, because, and actually really before I'd even written the book. So when I had the idea for what I wanted to write, that was the way I had to write it. And it really sounds strange, but basically my whole book was based on a diary. And it's that idea of the fact that you have to become friends with yourself when you're chronically ill, because you are that isolated, you know. And so the conversation aspect of it, it's like I'm talking to myself, just the other part, do you know it, you know, I'm having that dialogue with myself. And so it was a very sort of chatty, but not chat, it was just relaxed, because that, and also I feel like, as I say, the chapters in my books are really short, really short, and it's almost like it deals with the subject, moves on, deals with the subject, moves on. And that's actually because that's all I had the energy to do. And so it became a way of me sort of being able to write something and then shut off and move on to the next thing. So it wasn't in, you know, it was really about subjects almost. So it's events and then it goes on, but it is all based on a diary. I had a diary which I called Bug, and when I first got ill, I couldn't speak, and I was desperately, I remember it, I was very close with my brother and sister. They were very much my cheerleaders, and we were a three. And it was going to be my brother's birthday. It was going to be his 21st birthday, and I'd been in hospital for a month by that time. And I couldn't say happy birthday to him, and I couldn't tell him I loved him. And I was ill on his birthday, particularly I'd gone down with another virus type thing, and I couldn't say anything to him. And for me, that was really challenging, because I just wanted to say that I loved him. And thank you for, because my brother and sister, both, particularly my sister though, they had to give up their lives for my health, if that makes sense, because everything revolved around my health. So I just started this code up. And so it was the beginning of each word. So for love, it was la, because I couldn't get my brain to connect with my mouth. So I could think what I wanted to say, but I couldn't get it to actually come out of my mouth. And then the energy of thinking about that was too much. So that's how, and then I forgot how to speak, if that makes it. It's really bizarre, because when I spoke to therapists, and I was like, so what made you just be able to speak? I'm like, you tell me, how do you speak? You just say it. But what if that connection has gone? Then what? So it was really trying to work it out. And we had this little code going on with my family, that they were the only ones who could understand it. So it was the beginning of letters, or I think this meant hug, was drink, and those kind of things. And it was all sounds. But I would spend my day, once I did manage to say this message to my brother, so I basically said I love you to him, but through my little code. And then after that, I realized that if I did a sentence a day, and I spent that day deciding what that sentence would be, because I wanted the time to mean something. I didn't want it to be forgotten time. I didn't want it to be wasted. And so I would spend the day coming up with a sentence that then my family would sit there and listen to the every sound, and they would make up the sentence, check it over with me, that there would be a nod or a shake, and that would be that day. And so that's how it really started. And then as it continued, and I wasn't allowed to have visitors for a time because I was deemed too unwell to deal with the cognitive side of sort of having visitors in and the energy that took, then I literally had a microphone attached to here, to my top, and a dictaphone in my hand, and the only thing I could do was press the button, and I would record the sounds. And then the book came from me going back to that diary and making it into what I was trying to say at that time. So I think that's why in the books it's very much of the time, because it is what I was thinking, but I just couldn't express it.
Obviously, within your books, you do have sections which are kind of diary entries. Is that why they were so important to have those in there as well?
Yes, and I feel like they had to be in there in that book, because the diary saved my life. You know, it sounds ridiculous, but it literally did, because that was my friend. That was the only thing I had. And so when writing a book, it felt right that Bug was in that diary was in that book as the diary.
Yeah.
You know, and that there were sections where you could be just like, that is exactly that is how it was written. It was little sections for each day. But I also felt within the writing process, this was a way of quickly getting information in and moving on straight away. So it was things that I wanted the reader to know, but I didn't want that to be the only focus. I wanted it to be there, but not for me to have to do a chapter on it describing it. It was like the little bits happening that sort of, I always describe it as sewing everything together. Yeah. So it was like all these things happened. Because I think the strange thing is when you look at A Girl Behind Dark Glasses and you think, wow, a lot happened there. That's half the stuff that happened. You know, that's only the stuff I remembered. You know, and so I just wanted the little bits in there as well, which is why sort of Bug was in there. And as I say, it just felt right to have him in there. I always thought of him as like a Jiminy Cricket matchbox type thing, like a little friend that was there. And so when I was writing, I sort of really wanted to look at that imagery of what he meant to me, and have him in there.
Yeah, I loved those bits because it really did remind me of like parts of my own childhood, and it is these kind of like snappy little sections that you remember, and it's the little bit of a certain day that you remember, and it kind of just highlighted that to me as well. So I found that they worked so well to kind of like communicate what was going on and what was going on from like your viewpoint as well, rather than it being told as from somebody else. If you know what I mean.
Thank you. I think also it was really trying to get the age in there, you know. So it's the idea that, you know, that when you're a teenager, that's what you did, you know. You would and I was always about like you kept parts of your day. So, you know, like now you have people who record little bits of their day and then they make it into like a year and have all the different bits, and that's basically like the diaries that we used to keep when I was younger. But I also, as I say, I wanted to really get across the fact that I was just a kid and I was just young, you know. And I think when we move into A Girl in One Room, there's quite a change in the fact that when I came home, Bug wasn't as necessary. So I didn't feel like I had to just write my little bits because I was living it, even though I was in one room. I had people who were filling the time that Bug filled, if that makes sense. And so I felt like it was really good to have that shift of the fact that actually bug's not as relevant there. He was there, but he wasn't the friend he was in the first book. Because there was a specific time, particularly when I met my husband, as I say, because I was still in one room. I was still like, I didn't leave that room when I first met him, but it was a change. It was like okay, we can leave that behind now. We can move on to the next part of that. So I try to do that and show it in very subtle ways throughout the book. So it's almost like to show that growth. I did it within the writing, rather than saying, right, I've grown up now, because I hadn't grown up, but I just changed, and what I needed my needs had changed.
Yeah. Obviously with the first book, you do focus on kind of the time before all of this happened as well. How, for me as a reader, that was really important to kind of see. Was that always important for you to kind of include that there was kind of
a life before?
Yeah,
it was really essential to me, because again, it's all dealing with the identity and the fact that I was something before. And that's what I really wanted to get across, because when I was in hospital, it was very much they saw my body, they saw like the shell, but they didn't see the person. And at first they were trying to say that I was depressed, that I had all these things going on, and it wasn't until they spoke to the school nurse, who had then gone and spoken to all my friends, said, no, she's like a really popular kid, she's really high, she enjoys school, she's doing all of this. And then suddenly they took me seriously. It shouldn't have to go to that stage. And so when I was writing the book, I wanted to get across how I was before, and that stark difference to how I was after, and the fact that life got left behind. And as much as I still live, and I lost my childhood to that, and I wanted that to really be there, not to really upset people, but to just be there as a statement that this is what happened, and this is how my life changed over a period of months. It had gone, and then it's also about finding life within after that. It's finding a life which is meaningful within your boundaries, and I wanted to show that too. So what my life is now, I've described this when we look at sort of lockdowns and everything, and sort of what everyone's going through. My life is more restricted than any lockdown has ever been, but that doesn't make it less, and it doesn't make it not worthy. It doesn't make it better. It's not better, it's different, and that's okay. But I don't feel that I'm seen within that. If it's almost like the clinically vulnerable and things like that. We're just clinically vulnerable, we're not people, and that's what I really wanted to try and get across within that. Is that, again, it really is all about sort of identity, and also about feeling heard, feeling seen, and feeling valued within your boundaries, that I wanted to really write about, because it meant a lot to me as well. And I had aspirations, I had a life I wanted to live. I was very clear on what I wanted to do with my life, but it went overnight, like a click of a fingers, it's gone. And no one told me how to deal with that, no one helped me to deal with that. Oh, you're just depressed, or it was just things like that. And it's like, no, I just want to know what the outcome is, what have I got to go forward with. And even though I feel like in A Girl Behind Dark Glasses, it was very much, I still hoped like mad that this wasn't, I didn't see this as a lifelong condition. I didn't see it as chronic almost. I had no idea what was going on. And I really wanted to get across that innocence, that childhood innocence of the fact, what, you mean the doctors aren't going to just make it better? Because that's what they're meant to do, And that's really, again, the sort of images I wanted within the book were things like that, to sort of that innocence of but doctors give you medication. That's what they do, you know. And when they don't do that, or they do and it doesn't make it any better, what next?
Yeah.
You know, because we're not taught how to deal with that. No one's taught that.
No.
And that's the kind of thing that, as a 15-year-old, that's a big thing to sort of deal with. I think it's a big thing for anyone to deal with. But when you've got, you had everything, and it's a mind-boggling thing to think, well, I was just about to set GCSEs. What? I'm not doing that, you know. And it was that sort of childhood vulnerability and innocence. But then again, I really wanted to look at the vulnerabilities of being a teenager and being within ages. So when I first went into hospital, I was in a children's ward, and that felt a little bit easier. When I then went to being 16, I was moved straight into an adult ward, and I was not able to do that, really. That was such a jump.
Yeah.
And that's why I feel a lot of the things that happened to me happened was because I was still a child, and therefore I was the most vulnerable patient on that ward in many ways, both not just physically but also emotionally, mentally as well, because I didn't know what shouldn't happen, what should happen. I didn't know any of those things. So then I felt at that point a lot of what happened in that book, I feel happened because of my age. And that was why it was really important for me for it to be a YA memoir, because it's the stuff that shouldn't be happening, but you wouldn't know. Like, you know, if you turn over, like, you know, if you're a 15-year-old and then the next day you turn 16 and right, you're an adult now, you know, you're like, what? Oh, okay. You know, yeah, so that was really important to me too.
Yeah, definitely. What I really liked was the kind of how you kind of highlighted that, like, often it's kind of humor and imagination that are kind of the kind of best coping strategies that we kind of come up with, because I know for a lot of people sometimes my humor about situations is seen as a little bit strange or kind of misunderstood. I think some people would call it like dark humor a lot of the time. Was it always kind of like key to make sure that that kind of thread went through the books as well?
Yes. I mean, my family were all medical, so my dad and brother now are my dad's just retired, but they were both paramedics. And my mum was an ex-nurse, so we were used to having a very dark sense of humor. But also, when you're in a situation of sort of when you are literally with nothing, you have nothing, and you're thinking, I'm having to have someone help me wash. Like, this is ridiculous. The only way to deal with that sort of travesty as a 15-year-old or any age, thinking, what the hell? What has my life become that this is how it is for me, it was humor. It was sort of that imagination and humor. Imagination saved me again. It was really key to me dealing at the time, because it gave me, when I read a book, I was always a bookworm, and my sister and I would sit opposite each other with the same book, silence, getting through it like at the same time. And what I loved about books was the fact you could escape into that world, and you could almost live a different life for the amount of time that you're reading that book, and then you could go back to your life. And for me, that's what my imagination did. My love of books allowed me to then sort of escape into those worlds, when I couldn't speak, move, eat, anything, and I was sort of stuck in my own body. I could imagine times beyond that. I could go into the world of Harry Potter. I could go into like different parts of sort of fantasy worlds that I had been in within my reading, I could re-enter them, but in my own sort of time. And so I really wanted that to be in those books, was the fact that I think imagination was a medication in itself. And actually, when it comes to A Girl in One Room, there's a lot of humour, but it actually mainly comes from my sister, because my sister was she was very, very funny, very dry sense of humour. And again, it's because she had hurt so much. She had that really dry sense of humour, because it's how we had to deal with things. Like, she would say, well, your body seems to know it seemed to know when it's a celebration of any type, whenever we're meant to be celebrating, it knows, because it seems to, go off on one and we end up in hospital, birthdays, Christmas, Easter, all of those things. And it's like your body knows. And then my family would be like, oh, it's Friday, right, we might as well start ringing the doctors now, because or ringing 111 now, because it's literally like your body knows that it's a weekend. Friday night, you'll always end up in there. And I think also within A Girl in One Room, it is very much that you are in the second one, it is much more, you are going from place to place to place to place, whereas I think in A Girl Behind Dark Glasses, what makes that one work is the fact it's one place, it's hospital. But I really wanted in the second book to get across the fact that in a chronic illness world, it's actually appointments, hospital, bed. You are constantly going from different worlds, and in a way, I feel like that's, again, it's like you're going into a different book, you're going into a different part of your life that you're used to. So most people would be like, oh, I go to school, or I go to work or university. Mine was hospital. So that was my second home almost, that I was used to having, being in A&E. They knew my name and that kind of thing. Like you got used to that type of life, but it's a very different life to that of most young adults, teens. It's just, you don't, like, what, you just and I think for my sister's friends as well, it was just like, how are you coping? It's like, oh, I have to, don't I? You just have to. And it's that kind of thing. But I think with A Girl in One Room, I really wanted to get across how it is for her as well, as she was the 16-year-old, 15, 16-year-old. And I had moved on, but we were sort of the same age in a way, because socially, I wasn't any older. I hadn't had that experience. And also the experience of what it's like actually when you are fully well, and you're just used to, like, my sister was used to going out, thinking, right, I'm going out, I'm going to go and do this, and then 10 minutes before, oh, Jessica's going to be rushed off to the hospital, scrap those plans, I'm in the ambulance, I'm into the hospital. And that kind of thing is just something I don't think anyone is really aware of, that's the sort of life that someone, and I really feel like a chronic illness, it affects the whole family, and it's sort of how it affects everyone that I really wanted to get it across. But particularly when you do get to A Girl in One Room, Christmas catheters is one of the chapters titles, because it was just, it had to be, you're just like, not everyone ends up in hospital on Christmas Eve having like attempts of catheters put into them as your Christmas present. So there is always
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, exactly. It was interesting.
How kind of important do you think it is for this book to be read not just by kind of people who have chronic illnesses, but like the wider community as well? Because I think it's a really important thing for other people to kind of read, especially, dare I say it, doctors and some nurses. Did you always kind of hope that it would be something that could be kind of widely read and used as kind of like an understanding vessel, if that makes any sense?
So I think it makes complete sense, and it was an absolute the first thing I wanted to do. I don't want to write books that are just placing blame on other people. It doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help any situation. And it's actually not who I am as a person, you know, and these books really reflect who I am and about what makes, what I went through. But I don't want it to be like, oh, but the doctors caused that, or, oh, it was because the school pushed or anything like, because it happens, life happens and it goes in weird and wonderful ways. But I just wanted to get the human elements of actually, okay, so bad things happen, but that doesn't mean that has to be the end story. I think I literally put out a tweet not a few last week or even, it's the idea that, you know, yes, bad things can happen, but good things can come from those bad things. You know, I lived in one room for 12 years. That one room could be considered as a prison. I consider it as a world. It's the way you come to terms with what's happening. Like I have no control over the type of things that happen in my life. I can't tell you if, like last week, I ended up in A&E being rushed into hospital. I had no control over that. The thing I have control over is the way I deal with it, is the way I think, you know, okay, that's happened. This is what I'm now going to do, you know. And I really wanted there to be that that sort of conversation, because I think it's a really grey area. Apologies for the screamy child in the background. Yeah, so I kind of really wanted to sort of have an open conversation, literally just say, you know, okay, this has happened. What can we learn from it? And also, it's really good for people who are fully well to be able to read something and think, wow, I didn't actually realize that stuff happens. And it's not saying, I don't want to be saying, you should have realized this. Why didn't you know that all of this? I don't really care about that. I want people to understand that we all have different lives, and that what I went through, like I always say, what I go through, it can be, I always say it's relative. Okay, so what someone else might go through, like the worst thing that happened to me was the fact that, you know, I ended up having a central line put in my neck, and I didn't know what was going to happen, and they literally had me pinned down on the bed with people holding me down trying to put this thing in, and it was awful. For someone else it would be completely different, you know, but that doesn't change that you have the same emotions. It's a completely different subject, yeah, but it's the same thing. And I think as humans we should be connecting with other stories like that. And it's not for you to go, oh my god, I'm so lucky, you know, and everything like that. It's just to see a different point of view and to see a different life, you know, because the beauty of books is it's constantly making us learn. It's constantly, you know, whether fiction books are making you learn different language to be using, you know, different words that you can use to describe certain things. And, you know, for me, my books at the moment, these two that I've done, and as I say, I'm going into fiction now with what I'm writing now, but these books that I've done at the moment, you know, it's just giving you an experience that you don't have to fully experience. Like, I don't want you to become chronically ill and become seriously unwell to understand what I've been through. I really don't want that. So I just want you to read a book and actually think, wow, I wasn't expecting that, but look what I've learned, you know, and we move on and go on to the next, you know, next subject. Because at the end of it all, life is way too short for us to be sort of, you know, getting into politics of stuff like that. You know, this isn't what I write about. I write for the joy of writing. And I think that when you read those books, I think that's really what comes across, is the fact that there's a joy within that and a joy for life, you know. And that's my overall message for my books is, you know, live in whatever capacity you can, live, because, you know, you never know what's around the corner, and you shouldn't have to be always, you know, thinking, oh my god, what's going to happen. You should just live. And within my capacity of either a hospital or one room, I still lived. and it was a very different type of living, but it was still living. And you know what, as much as I would never wish it to happen to anyone, my friends always say to me, the friends I went to school with, the friends who'd known me as a little kid onwards, my family friends who were my age, he said, you know, my best friend who's in it, Nick, he's one of the only characters mentioned in the book, because I really try as well to not mention other characters, as because I really wanted it to be about this story, and the fact that it was just me and there wasn't really anyone else there to be the extra characters. But Nick was the only one who would visit me, and he was, because he had been doing it from the start, and so he knew how long to take, he knew when to go. And he said to me the other day, he said, do you know what, if you hadn't have got ill, you wouldn't have done half the stuff you've done. He said, I can see you have just going into a 9 to 5 job just because it was easier, just going to university because that's what everyone did. And he said, so as much as I hate having seen you suffer as you have, and I hate it, I think you've done so much more than you probably would have done without it. And it's a really weird thing, because it's not like you can be thankful for things like that, but you know, silver linings.
Yeah, like, you're gonna get me to tear it, because like I'm very much similar in that, like, I don't think I would have taken some of the risks I've taken in my life if I didn't have my health problems and I hadn't had my health experiences I had when I was younger. And it is that really kind of like strange balance between not wanting to have like experienced that in a way, because obviously you don't want to have been ill and done that, but then it comes back to identity, like how much of who I am and the decisions I make now are a reflection of kind of my health conditions and what's happened to me.
Yeah, and I think honestly, we as people come from our experiences. We grow because of our experiences. And so as much as sort of what we've all been through, like when in the chronic illness community, when you're ill from a young age, and everything that you go through, they have an influence on how you are as a person after or going forwards. And that's, I suppose, where I'm looking at the sort of how that identity works, when we're looking at, am I the illness, or is the illness me, or am I something else? And I think in A Girl Behind Dark Glasses, the illness is me. When we go into A Girl in One Room, it's almost the other way round. And it is just, I guess, growing up on your own, because you don't see, you know, as teens, you're always growing up and changing all the time, but you don't see it because you're doing that. But if you imagine that you don't leave one room, you're growing up and you're watching yourself grow up, and it's a very weird experience, because you're suddenly like, I wasn't like that, but now how do I feel about that? And those are the kind of questions that I'm posing within my writing, is actually what equates to living well. Yeah. And that kind of thing, those kind of questions, and thinking, actually, you know, I think as well, when I was young, there was a very clear trajectory as to what I was doing, and what everyone did was, we finished school, we did GCSEs, then we did our A-levels, then we went to university, then we went into a job, then we went and did this, and then we did that. Life doesn't work like that. And as young adults, I think it's really important for people to know that's not how it works. Yeah. You know, because I think we have this image of how it has to work. It never works like that. Never works like that. And I wish I had known that as like a 12-year-old, 13-year-old onwards, all the way up, because I think it would have literally changed how I was. Yeah. Because, you know, there's so much pressure on how we should and what we have to do and all those things. You're like, girl, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Like, you know, there's nothing, it doesn't change what you will get at the end of it. That's down to you as the person. So yeah, so I think in some ways A Girl Behind Dark Glasses, and particularly A Girl in One Room, is sort of a parts of it are love stories to myself as before that time, to say, do you know what, you were really hard on yourself when you were younger, look at what you've got through. You know, now we can end it and now we can move on.
Yeah, because I think the kind of anybody going through growing up will be is hard on themselves. It's one of those times where like your emotions are all over the place, and you're always going to be kind of looking at the kind of trajectory, oh, I can't speak now, that everyone kind of says you have to go on, and whether or not you're meeting that or not meeting that. And I think it doesn't work like that for anybody. Like, whether you have chronic illnesses or not, it isn't a case of just do your GCSEs, A-levels, go to uni, find a nice 9 to 5, and then buy a house and start a family and like blah, 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 blah.
Exactly.
It doesn't
Exactly.
work
Yeah.
like that
It
for
doesn't work like that.
anybody.
And I think in a sense, it's self-discovery, isn't it? And I think like these books are really like self-discovery, but on a really extreme level. So it's like going to extreme extents to find out who you are and what makes you tick and everything. Um, but yeah, you know, I mean, I look at my friends now, I keep up with a couple of them. I don't keep up with everyone because our lives have sort of changed so much. But we've all ended up at the same part, just in different ways. And I went in a completely different direction to them. We all got there in the end, you know. And I really wish I could just tell sort of teens, it's like literally just live. It's all good, you know, because it doesn't. We have so much pressure on what we should be doing, and actually, then you forget the living part of it and sort of the whole enjoying living. That's the thing. Enjoy it, you know, because you never know what's around the corner, but also just live in the moment. And that's another thing that I really wanted to get across, is living in that moment within books as well, you know, living everything, no matter what you're going through, living it to your happiest or to what you want from it. Because that's the other thing, like what I want and maybe what you want, completely different things. It doesn't mean they're any less valuable, you know. And I think we're just so used to having to follow a way.
Yeah.
And so in a way, I really want people who aren't chronically ill to read the books, because I want other people to be like, oh wow, okay, this can happen and we can still have an outcome after that. So, you know, it's okay, we can just go and, you know, live and learn and experience, and hopefully we don't have to go through what everyone else is going through just to understand, and have empathy as well, because that's the real thing, is you want people who don't have these conditions or don't have any of that, just to, you know, have a bit of empathy for others, you know, in all different situations. And I think that A Girl Behind Dark Glasses, and particularly A Girl in One Room, it gives you that opportunity to do that, and then hopefully never have to experience it.
Yeah, because nobody wants that for anybody.
No, that would be a bit extreme, wouldn't it, if you had to read a book and then experience it to then understand it. It's like, no, you don't have to do that. It's all good. I've done it for you.
Here's your prize at the end.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much for answering all of our questions. It's been really nice talking to you for many reasons.
Oh, thank you. It's been lovely to chat to you. And as I say, thank you for just involving A Girl Behind Dark Glasses and The Girl in One Room in your YA week, author week, because that so needs to happen. Like, that's such a cool thing to have, you know, an actual celebration of YA authors, because it's definitely the best, definitely the best genre, and definitely the best.
It's it's just the best. And I think one of the reasons it is the best is there's so many books there covering so many different things, and it's always kind of at the forefront, I think, of kind of exploring other people's lives and creating those situations that you can kind of really think about and understand other people
Yeah, and
through.
yeah, and really starting conversations, you know. It's just, yeah, it's really nice. And it's also, it's so in the heart as well, you know, like you can feel in a YA book, you can feel everything, you know. And I've always felt that they're in a way easier to read, but they pose greater questions, you know. So you've got a very deep book, but it's quite easy to read, and that's always good.
Yeah, definitely. They kind, it's accessible, isn't it? It's like an
Yeah,
accessible way to kind of ponder those questions or find out those things about something that maybe you didn't know, or just escape to a world filled with dragons, which, you know, I love to
everyone
do
wants
all
to
the
do.
time.
Everyone wants to do. Yeah.